Let's return to This Week in America. Here's your host, Rick Bratton.
Welcome back, everybody. Coast to Coast, This Week in America. Presented as 138 narrative-style poems, some of which are rhyming, others are prose or in blank verse. Reflections on Mountaineering, a journey through life as experienced in the mountains, 5th edition, revised and expanded, summarizes of what the author Alan V. Coleman learned in his more than 30 years of climbing, either from personal experience or from his mountaineering peers. Alan came to realize that many of the same moral issues that confront us in everyday life are likewise present in the high mountains, only to a sharper degree. Collectively, the poems constitute a meditation on the nature of reality itself, as perceived in the context of exploring the limits of human understanding and achievement. Alan is a graduate of Horace Mann School in 1975, Harvard College 1979, and Harvard Law School 1982. In addition to his mountaineering achievements and adventures, he practiced law for many years, now retired. Back with us on This Week in America, Alan V. Goldman, author of Reflections of Mountaineering, Our Journey Through Life as Experienced in the Mountains, 5th edition, revised and expanded with Addendum. Alan, it's great to have you back with us on the program.
Yes, indeed. Thanks for having me. When we did the interview, I think it was 2 years ago.
Yes.
The book had approximately 70 or so poems. Now it has 148. It's in its, as you said, in its 5th edition. I think we were then dealing with the 2nd edition. But the themes that pervaded the book back then continue to pervade the book now. So there's been no sea change in the principles applicable. I believe I'm the first person, at least that I know of, who's applied existentialist philosophy, which we'll talk more about later, I suppose, to climbing, which it seems strange to me because climbing is the very essence of existentialist activity. You create something out of nothing. You know, after all, a mountain is just a pile of snow, rock, and ice.
Yes.
Until it's differentiated from other piles of snow, rock, and ice, it doesn't really exist for us. But the moment a climber sets foot on the mountain and begins his endeavor, he is creating new human meaning where nothing had existed before. God is supposed to have created the world out of nothing, ex nihilo. But the philosophy of existentialism contends that human beings can do the same for themselves by the choices they make as they go through life in the exercise of their free will.
It's a fascinating concept that you delve into in the book Reflections on Mountaineering. Now, this is the 5th edition. As Alan mentioned, we talked a couple of editions ago, more that he's added to the book. The book available wherever books are sold, and you can go directly to Alan's website, which is mountainreflections.art. That's on our website, thisweekinamerica.us. I want to continue a little bit more on that theme that you were talking about, but let's just lay a little groundwork here. I want to go back with your legal background, your academic background. How did you become attracted to mountaineering? Why did you get involved in mountaineering in the first place?
Well, there were several stages of development in my activity that led to it, but you're right. Being born in New York City in Central Park West, the question arises: how did a nice become interested in mountaineering? The things don't go together. Indeed, I regard myself as something of a portal between that world, the subculture of climbing, which is what I believe it is. Especially for people who do it 24/7, 365 days a year, and the Eastern sensibility, the literary sensibility, because most climbers are not English majors, and they don't write well, except in the memoir listing, like a laundry list, their achievements. I did this, then I did that, then
yes.
I did this, then I did that. My book isn't like that. It's not about nature or even mountaineering as such. It's about not nature, but human nature. I may be permitted to employ a play on words there. It explores human nature while under self-imposed duress. And it's surprising how it reveals character, which is another subject we may get to later. But the stress often brings out both the very best in human people, human beings, altruistic, self-sacrificing, selfless acts, and the very worst, rank cowardice, a word people don't use very much anymore, but it does exist. There's always somebody in the rear with the gear who's just never present when the selection is being made for who is going to break the trail, walking through hip-deep snow.
Yes.
So that everyone will follow you in the path. Your precious energy is being consumed, and it imperils your ability to make the summit. So you're in a sense, being sacrificed by the team leader so that others can make the summit. The youngest, strongest junior person does this kind of preparatory work.
It's a fascinating look at the mountaineering, and so much. And I love our conversations. All of a sudden, you're putting yourself where Alan has been, where others have been with him as well. And how would you react? And then that carries over to real life and tells us about something, how we react in various situations in our everyday lives. The book is Reflections on Mountaineering, a journey through life's experience in the mountains. And all you have to do is look at the cover and see this. You see Alan, this vast background, and the mountains and the snow, and it gives you a whole new appreciation. And as Alan said, and I love that, it's not about nature, it's about human nature, and that's exactly what it is. His website is mountainreflections.art. You talk in the book a lot about the flow. What is the flow? Why do people seek to experience the flow, and how does it manifest itself in the mountains?
Well, flow is a pleasurable psychological state of mind. And it's one of the lures that climbing in the high mountains presents. It arises out of the very activity that you perform during the process of getting to the summit. It's not about being on the summit, it's about the process of getting to it. There are innumerable small activities that need to be performed, putting in the piton or the chalkstone, attaching a carabiner to it, putting a rope into the carabiner, then fixing with a special knot that rope to your climbing harness in which you're relying, and then looking for the next handhold or foothold, and all these little things build up. Well, I could say that flow is its own reward for so-called autotelic personality. A self-directed activity is its own reward. What is the feeling engendered by flow? Well, many sociologists have addressed this outside the context of mountaineering in various professions and occupations. And they say it brings about a generalized feeling of well-being, a kind of calm exaltation, not frenetic, not a drug high, but to use the pun again, a Rocky Mountain high, as John Denver gave understand. It comes over you as as your confidence builds during the performance of these acts. There are academic definitions. I can run it by you quickly. Flow has been said to be the sensation of competent mastery over your environment by the accretion, that's a $10 word, of a series of small successes, okay, that are self-reinforcing during the course of executing a self-directed activity of great difficulty. And when you've done that, it has been said that you have the feeling of, well, in sports, people talk about being in the zone.
In the zone, yes. I was just thinking of that.
Living in the moment. The feeling that, particularly in climbing, that everything is falling into place, that your plan is being realized. It's a very heady feeling to see your plans come to fruition. It all disappears if there's an accident, of course.
Yes.
And there are interludes between intense periods of total immersion and concentration and focus on the activity which is required that you're doing. And the world then rushes back in on you, and your situational awareness changes. But the feeling of flow resumes once you resume the activity. It is a sense of personal transcendence over the world around you. You're making the world bend to your will. It's been said that it's almost Zen-like.
Yes, I can believe that.
In the kind of trance it immerses you in. And it's one of the draws of climbing, in addition to the uncertainty of the outcome itself. Of course, that's why it's an adventure risk sport. And also the ability to set the term. It's just sort of cheating on yourself, but you set the terms of your own challenge. That's what I found appealing about it.
Yes.
You pick a mountain, this mountain and not that mountain, something you think you can climb. And then you pick a route that you think you can master, because it all depends upon what route you're taking and what season of the year you're going. It's not unlike the hiking that well, to get back to the beginning, which I think we still need to do, you should know that, I was not a jock in high school. I didn't like organized team sports. Now, I was on the wrestling, quote, team, but it's not a team in the same sense as a basketball team or a football team.
Yes.
It's one-on-one. It's a one-on-one challenge. And after law school and the taste of Wall Street lawyering, I began to, have a moment of clarity, as they say, a moment of clarity in which I felt I don't want to spend the rest of my life totally consumed by this, hunched over a desk, checking footnotes for somebody else's brief. Eventually it will be yours if you stick it out, long enough. But there has to be something more to life than that. And I was surprised that when I tried to climb my first mountain, I found that it was something I could do. And it gave me great self-confidence. The purpose of attaining flow is to engage in an activity that creates meaning, creates some kind of significance for human beings of the mountain, which otherwise would be just an inert, inanimate pile of rock, snow, and ice.
Yes.
This concept of creating something out of nothing is, in a way, godlike. In my very first poem in the book, I address this phenomenon, being and nothingness, which, if you permit me, I'll read just a brief portion.
Yes, please do.
I have talking mountains in my book, and this is one of the poems in which the mountain speaks. Of course, it's a reflection of what you think it would be saying if it could talk.
Yes.
Okay? But here goes the mountain. Barren, yet brazen, bold and beautiful for you to behold. My summit glistens with morning dew, etched into hoarfrost, special kind of snow, cloaking my native peak, and still more with your passing like a mirage, my summit shimmers, with an unearthly refraction, trembling from your evanescent embrace, reflecting your stamp of individuality, to create the ultimate existential act of impressing meaning out of nothingness. It's one of the central tenets of Sartre, Jean-Paul Sartre, the French philosopher. Who textbooks on this subject back in the 40s. I go on to say, the narrator speaks. See the mountain's clouds of clearing haze, as though the mountain were saying, here am I, see how easy it would be to crawl up my highest flanks, to scale me in a day. Just then, like a woman having temptingly hiked up her skirt, only so far and no further, the mountain's pole descends and shrouds it in a whirl of snow, clouds, and ice, covering its summit with the mist of my dreams, as if flirting with me. The vision of wonder is thus withdrawn in a moment of absence and gloom shading my peak. And the mountain speaks, chiding the climber. It says, see here, the mountain might say, I was but the quintessence of nothingness, until you forced your will upon my blank form, and by your striving imparted meaningfulness to my abidingly neutral presence. That's the core statement in the book of what the goal of climbing is.
Yes.
It's not just to attain the summit, it's to express yourself by the route you select and the speed at which you go at and the difficulty of the route, the season you climb. I always climbed my mountains in winter out in the Rockies because I was preparing myself for the Alps because they have heavy snow all through the year.
There are so many elements that you discuss. The book is so well written. It's reflections on mountaineering, a journey through life as experienced in the mountains. Now, this is the 5th edition, revised, expanded, and addendum. The authors are guest Alan V. as in Victor Goldman. Book available wherever books are sold. Winner of the 2022 Pacific Book Awards. His website, Alan's website, is mountainreflections.art. This really is the ultimate pursuit of happiness, isn't it?
That phrase, the pursuit of happiness, with a capital P and a capital H, back in the 18th century when Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence in 1776, is the very purpose, he believed, for government in the first place, and that it's the duty of government to guarantee a person's life, liberty, and what?
Pursuit of happiness. Yep.
Not say property. What is unique about America is that you're supposed to have an equal chance in the race of life. You're supposed to be able to rise to the level that your own talent will take you. And it's this concept that was so threatening to the established order in Europe of his day, which was, just post-medieval, where there were strict caste and class restrictions on who could do what. Very often, a son was expected and allowed only to go into the same trade that his father had. So if his father was a barrel maker, you were going to be a barrel maker. The idea of social mobility through the exercise of personal talent and effort is that social mobility should exist because of the exercise of your talent and the efforts that you put into it, is the very core of the so-called American dream. It's what sets America apart from the rest of the world, or what we flatter ourselves thinking that it does. And it posed a tremendous threat to the established, as I said, the established order in Europe. We were like the communists of our day.
Yes.
Because of an insistence on the individual's right. As Jefferson said, government is instituted among men, he did say men, for the purpose of guaranteeing the unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, in climbing, we have an adage, which is as old as the hills, namely the freedom of the hills. And the standard textbook in the field is entitled Mountaineering, the freedom of the hills. And the first sentence of the first edition back in 1960 said, the quest, already we're talking in religious terms here, the quest of the mountaineer, in simplest terms, is for the freedom of the hills. Now, I contend that the freedom of the hills is just one form of expression that falls under the umbrella of the pursuit of happiness. It's one form of activity that you should be free to follow your own will, and not have the government tell you you're going to be this and you're going to be that, and not allowing and so on and so forth. The pursuit of happiness does encompass the freedom of the hills. And I wrote a poem entitled The Freedom of the Hills, in which I discuss the various aspects of it. Its political significance, its physical meaning, and most importantly of all, I think, is its psychological. I'd like to read just a brief section of that.
Yes, if you would. And all of these, boy, there's so much more that's packed into Reflections on Mountaineering. That's Alan's book, A Journey Through Life as Experienced in the Mountains. If you have one of the previous editions, this is the 5th edition. It's new, more material in there, book available wherever books are sold. Find out information at Alan's website, mountainreflections.art. We have all of that on our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Alan, if you would, read us something from that poem.
Yes, you can find it on page 118, entitled The Freedom of the Hills. And it starts out by saying what I just told you. As is said in the first line of the first edition of the classic textbook, quote, Mountaineering, the quest of the mountaineer in simplest terms is for the freedom of the hills. Now, I go on to say, peering from my tiny ledge, I see the creatures below carrying on like ants. Well, I am free of mundane worries and all the pedestrian no you can't. Is this, then, more of the freedom of the hills? Well, examined carefully, at least 3 connotations emanate from this motto's will. First, the age-old adage, montani semper liberi, which is Latin for mountain people are always free. Now, obviously, the Romans were thinking in terms of, people like the Swiss who controlled the passes into the country. Politically, they are more apt to be independent than people living at sea level, subject to the centralized government.
Yes.
Now, the obvious meaning of it, however, is the physical sense. Mountaineers cultivate technical skills that enable them to go wherever they want without fear. As I wrote, even to places wholly frozen where others fear to tread. you can go without dread. It's a combination of specialized equipment, the ice axe, the crampons, pitons or shock stones that you pound into the mountain, which then have a rope attached to them through a carabiner that hopefully will hold you if you fall. You don't use the rope to pull yourself up the mountain. Absolutely not. You can't do that. Physically, you can't do it, and it's just there as a precaution. And it's a real art form, determining when and where and how to put in protection, and it's delegated to the leader who has the option, being at the sharp end of the rope, meaning there's no rope running above him. He gets to decide where and when he puts in protection for the next climber, who then leapfrogs over him, gets to his point, and then the second person then becomes the first person, and he leads the way. And it's his turn to put in protection where he thinks it's right. So you really need to be able to rely on your rope partner.
Yes.
To finish this off, I wrote in the poem, but more subtly and importantly, mountaineers are also free internally in the psychological sense. For they are more in touch with their aspirations in the, quote, pursuit of happiness, as they conceive it, than those who lack dedication to the heights, not even to try to achieve some deed of merit, and thus can only mock the mountaineer, regarding him as reckless or whatever, as I wrote, with supercilious disparagement, born of ignorance or spite. When in the heights, mountaineers are thus free from the judgment of others, except their peers who have already been there and done that, and your instructors. They're qualified to critique your climbing form. You know, it's sort of like a ballet up there, and you're supposed to do it in fluid fashion, and your style of climbing you can be critiqued by people who are entitled to do so, but not by people who are ignorant of what it is that you're doing, and just look at you through a telescope down below and say, you know, how does he? What is he? A human fly? Why is he taking this chance? Well, absolutely not. Climbing is about getting from point A to point B in the safest manner possible. It's not about free solo, which has become the rage on the internet in the last few months, where some 18-year-old made an ascent of a rock wall in Yosemite, California, without the use of any ropes at all. So if he sneezed or hiccuped or slipped a little, that would be the last mountain he climbed.
Yes.
That was the end. That's a stunt, okay? That's a daredevil stunt. Like when Philippe Petit walked between the two towers of the Trade Center back in the day.
Yeah, that was a stunt.
On a rope. It's not the sport of climbing, and people shouldn't feel that it is. We are not action addicted, junkies, adrenaline junkies. Mountaineers are serious people who are cognizant more than others of the history of the mountain, of attempts made by other climbers in the past on this or that route, and the lore, L-O-R-E, of the mountain emerges from the accumulation of human activity on it. That's why, one of the reasons why I say trying to climb the mountain in and of itself creates meaning, in the existential sense.
Well, there are so many things that we could talk about. The time has gone by so quickly, as it always does, having Ellen on the program. There's so many things that we can talk about. I love the passion. I love the way you talk about applications of what you learned in mountain climbing and how that carries over into everyday life. The book is so well written. This is the 5th edition. What are you working on now? Are you continuing to work on Reflections on Mountaineering?
No, the book is now closed. I wrote, as you mentioned, an addendum of 10 poems in which I point out some of the limitations of the existentialist theory and its tenets of free will, always being available to control the destiny of your life and how you shape it. That's not always true, the determinists will say, because of the circumscribing effects of both nature and nurture. And what do I mean by that? In a nutshell, nature is your DNA, your physical appearance. If you're the archetypal 98-pound weakling, you're not going to try out for a position with the Miami Dolphins as a linebacker. It just isn't going to work.
Yes.
So certain things are just not suitable for you because of physically who you are. More importantly, though, is the nurture idea. This posits that the cultural values, your heritage that was instilled in you during childhood when you believed any adult, certainly your teachers and your parents, that this constrains your ability to make a so-called choice between this and that in the exercise of your alleged free will. I have a poem called Constrained Freedom, which is in the addendum, and it talks about this qualifying aspect that I bring up.
Yes.
To put some context for the claims of existentialism. I do believe, nonetheless, in the existence of free will, which determinists do not. I believe that each person is a free moral agent upon attaining maturity, and that determinism is alien to the human condition. But, people on the left, the Marxists, they're all about determinism. They say your choices are based upon what class you come from. It's a status thing. They say what you choose, it reflects what you were inculcated to believe.
Yes.
And that there is no such thing as free will. I said in that poem on page 266-67, number 8 in the addendum, Constrained Freedom, a paradoxical analysis. It goes on to say nature, our DNA or physical heritage, and nurture, including our cultural heritage that has been inculcated into us from birth, combine to circumscribe the scope of my, quote, freedom to choose what it is that I want to choose. So the determinists are saying you are not free to choose whatever you want to do. What it is that you like is already predetermined by how you were reared and the class from which you come. Indeed, they say if you know enough about a particular person, you can virtually predict what choice he'll make in any given situation, whether it's at sea level or in the high mountains. I reject the notion that everything stems from your class and your rearing. There is a spark of individuality in every person.
Yes.
Indeed, that going back to flow, the purpose of climbing becomes the process of climbing as its own reward, and to put the stamp of your individuality on the mountain through, mountain lore accumulating about what you did and when, people talking, in the bars or around a fireplace, a fire in the woods, whatever.
Yes.
It's something that's unique. Each person has a certain uniqueness that determinism rejects.
Well, I love the presentation in the book, and hopefully we'll have a chance to continue. There's so many different elements that you bring out in the book. The book is Reflections on Mountaineering, A Journey Through Life as Experienced in the Mountains. This is the 5th edition, revised, expanded with an addendum by Alan V. Goldman, the author. His website is mountainreflectionsart.com. The book available, of course, wherever books are sold. I'd like to thank King Pages Press, Alan's marketing consultant, for arranging our conversation today, results-oriented, making sure your work gets the attention it truly deserves. Alan, it is always a pleasure having you on the program. Look forward to doing it again. Thank you for being with us. So many thought-provoking elements during the course of the conversation today. We'll be playing this back in our minds and thinking about it for quite some time. Thank you for being with us and sharing on the program today.
Thank you, Rick.
Always a pleasure. Alan V. Goldman. The book is Reflections on Mountaineering. His website is mountainreflections.art. You're listening to This Week in America, and we're back right after these messages.
This Week in America is online. You can visit our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Scott Pinkerton, associate producer of This Week in America. Jay Anderson, segment producer. Ben Watson, webmaster. Otto Bechet, director of engineering and TV production. This Week in America produced and is a trademark of Blue Funk Broadcasting, LLC. For information on all of our guests and to listen to this week's show, our website again at thisweekinamerica.us. And I'm Sean Bratton, executive producer of This Week in America.